Good morning, welcome to IoT North Breakfast Club. Great to have you here. We've got a great lineup this morning, and we're going to be talking about user experience and discussing why customer discovery and validation are key to delivering great user experiences. As the Internet of Things and all the elements are evolving to mass adoption, the technology providers will start to look at how they can stand out from the crowd. User experience, UX, is often an afterthought and a part of but is a key element to the success. As an example, there are a number of Internet of Things connectivity platforms in the market, from telecom providers to resellers and aggregators. What makes them stand out? It's the user focus that they have. Companies like Twilio are really, really good at this. They've really disrupted the SMS and voice, the communication industry, and they're working now, on the stock market for billions. And they really focus on user experience. They've really knocked this out the park. In stuff like artificial intelligence, like Xailient that we had on a Breakfast Club a few weeks ago, they've really focused on how to make models in vision and AI much easier. Chooch.ai are doing a similar thing as well to help accelerate the adoption of that technology as well. So we have a panel of product specialists on today: Helena Hill, Dan Dalton, and Henry Latham. Let me bring the guys into the stream. There you go. It was almost like Charlie's Angels for a second there as I brought you guys in. Good morning, guys. How are you doing?
Good.
Morning.
Brilliant. Thanks to have you on board. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself and just share everybody your experience?
Yeah, cool. So I'm Dan Dalton. I'm a senior product manager here at Pendo, and I'm responsible for all of our voice of the customer products, which is essentially all of the qualitative data products that Pendo has. So think polls and surveys, NPS, feedback products. I've been in product for about 10 years, previous head of product experience and UX. I'm based in Newcastle.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dan. Great to have you on board. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, Helena. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. So I'm Helena Hill. I'm a director at Helena Hill Consulting. So I'm a UX consultant. I also work with companies right from pre-starts up to globals on their customer experience planning and their service design as well. So I'm very lucky. I love what I do, and it's great to be here this morning. Thanks, Paul, for inviting me.
Oh, more than a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us. And all the way from Brazil is Henry. Hi, Henry. How are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah, hi, I'm Henry. I'm founder and lead mentor of Product MBA, where we fast track product managers and product owners to head of product. I've been in product for about 8 or 9 years and have a lot to talk about when it comes to leveraging customer insight and UX, because I've made every mistake possible and tried to rectify all of those mistakes over the last 7 years or so.
Brilliant. Thanks for being on board. Sorry, I've just lost my screen. There we go. So let's start with helping everybody understand what UX is. Helena, would you like to just give a bit of an overview of what user experience is?
Okay, so I think for me, user experience is about ensuring that what you want to produce, so whether that be a product or a service or a process, for example, always has the user at the very heart of what you're doing. So for me, user is at the very heart of all your decision-making processes. So if you're talking of UX maturity, for example, you'd be looking at companies such as Apple, such as Amazon, for example. And the way that they've been able to do that is basically said right from the very start, the customer is central to what we do. And so therefore, for me, it's bringing together technology, it's bringing together connectivity, and it's bringing together that end user experience. It's all about how somebody feels when they're using something. And I think that's something that or some people don't quite understand. It's not always about usability, it's about experience. And the two are quite different. So I just want, that to put that out there straight away, is that usability and experience are two different things. So something that could be easy to use, but not necessarily enjoyable. So for me, user experience is about making using a product, service, or process enjoyable to use, as well as being easy. So that's start off from me.
Brilliant. Dan, would you like to add anything to that?
No, it's just a massive +1. I think the way I think about it is that the connective tissue between a set of experiences into a holistic journey. And you think about user experience, it's the end-to-end process of me using a thing. You think about, the process of using your phone, any app, it's just a connective tissue that combines all of these things.
Great. Henry?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, but I think with a caveat, this is something I see, when you deal with a UX designer versus, let's say, a product manager, that it's, yes, you need to be thinking about the user experience, but also within what the sort of strategic framework of the business is. So it's like we want to be making sure the experience is high quality, so we deliver value to the customers, and not just the user as well, to the customer. So that we then deliver value to the business. That's sort of the implication there, right? You build a product customers love, they're more likely to pay for it in most cases. But I think also having that business mindset is important, depending on the role you're in, right? As a product manager versus designer.
And I think that's one of the key things, actually, is that, especially in technology with Internet of Things and the tools that people have, because Internet of Things is lots of elements. There's software, hardware, connectivity, software connectivity into other software to expand, to enable that digital transformation. So there's a lot of parts, and that sometimes with what I found through my experience is that there are different personas that have input into the experience as well. So you've got your buyer who may not be a user, but they're wanting to buy it to bring it into their business, and then there's different levels of users. A manager may want a different view of experience to the actual day-to-day user as well. And sometimes that's an oversight when the technology is being developed. Because somebody at the top says this is what they want, then, somebody from the top in the business goes, right, build this, when actually they haven't thought about, but the user doesn't want that. That's completely irrelevant for them. It's just noise.
It's certainly one of the challenges, from my experience that I've seen, particularly in the B2B market, where your buyer, your procurer, and your end user are different people. Yeah. So, and they're under various, the procurer or the buyer often has to go through several steps in which to be able to say, okay, or to get several sign-offs. And has different priorities to that of the end user. So it is very important to, I think you're quite right, Paul, to distinguish, the difference between the fact that, that I have developed, buyer personas and end user personas, or segments of, certainly, when it comes to B2B. Yeah, one,
definitely, I think that thinking about the two players or multiple players, right, is really important. I think one really common mistake I see in this is core part of our training, right, for product managers, is because in most cases they're working quite waterfall environments, right, where things are passed down to them. So there's something sort of clear that they are working on. You tend to see this mindset where they're not actually understanding the deep problem, and therefore it's very difficult to raise awareness and acquire customers effectively, which some people put in marketing, I think, is a key part of a product, right? Because product is the whole experience. So you tend to see them trying to address what we call the external problem and not the internal problem. So as an example, right? Say you're selling a Philip Patek watch, right? One of these nice Swiss watches. People aren't buying that to tell the time. So if you put on your website, tell the time easily or effectively, people don't actually care about that. They care about that thing under that deeper level, right? The internal problem really around status, social status, showing off, also legacy, right? Passing that to your kids, for example. And I think a common mistake that I see in more so with product managers, because they lack this design thinking background in many cases, is not quite getting to the root of something. So when they're doing user research, right? When they are speaking to customers, when they're trying to develop insights to then leverage those within the product experience themselves, they're tend to be staying very surface level and firstly not resonating. Secondly, they're not quite understanding actually what really are we trying to solve here, and opening that other door to different kinds of solutions.
I think that goes to show, though, the importance of understanding your users. And that's one of the questions that you posed, Paul, actually, for today, was what tools do we use for this, for customer? And one of the tools that I always encourage, because I teach as well as as well as facilitate, and consult. And one of the tools that I talk about a lot is empathy mapping. And I think that goes to help solve some of the issues that just brought up there because by Henry, because that you're quite right. The benefit to those people of wearing that watch is not telling the time. Is it? They can always take their phone out of their pocket to do something like that. The benefit to them, as you quite rightly stated there, was status, and it looking good and being able to say to friends, hey, look what I've just bought, for example. And that empathy mapping and that value proposition canvas, I think, can really help us do that. And I think it's those companies, IoT or not, who take that extra time to be able to really understand who their end user is and what it is exactly they want from this. And you're quite right, it's not to tell the time, it's for something quite different. And it's then how they get that messaging out via their digital channels.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really interesting things, Helena, that taking the time, it's a journey, it's not like it's a stop process, but taking the time and just planning that through as part of the roadmap and building the journey through. And it's constant, even once you've launched your product, you go for MVP, alpha, beta, and moving forward. That it's a constant journey, even when it's in production, that you're looking at what you're going to evolve, what you're going to keep, what you're going to build on, so on and so forth as well. Dan, with Helena mentioned about the tools. What kind of tools do you recommend? Obviously, Pendo, I'd make a presumption. How does that help with this process?
Yeah, I think like one of the frameworks, just kind of touching off what Henry and Helena said there, is jobs to be done. For us, really taking the time to understand the true job to be done. I think like jobs to be done is one of those things of where you might think you understand jobs to be done, but really having that experience and kind of flexing that muscle as you really dive deep into it is really important. So that's one of the things that we use quite heavily, of whether it's from a growth or a revenue perspective, understanding the very moment in time someone then submitted a demo request to buy your product versus the actual job that product does for them. So really separating those two things out. What's the motivation to buy versus what's the problem they're trying to solve? They're two very different things. One is just how bad can it get before they want to spend some money to solve the problem. The second one is the problem itself. So I think the distinction that Henry and Helena made there is really important about separating all of that out. Buyer versus user is a really crucial distinction. In terms of the tools that we use, I think a lot of the things that Pendo does in terms of the in-app guidance, we're a massive fan sort of the in-app testing experience. So we have a user research team. We spend a lot of time talking to customers about the various things that we have going on, but we also do a lot of in-app testing. We're really big on experimentation, so we're a massive fan of A/B tests. A common pitfall of A/B tests that we see is that a lot of people just do A/B tests for the reason. We only do an A/B test if we can actually take something actionable out of it. We always talk about experimentation in terms of outcome, not just sort of vanity data or an A/B test to prove how good something is, incremental testing, things like that. It's important to label them properly when it comes to experimentation. We always think in terms of the outcome. A test is only successful if you can take something away from it, implement it, share those learnings, and actually improve on that thing. So yeah, in terms of the tools, A/B testing is a staple of what we do at Pendo.
Yeah, I mean, when we were building, so with IoT North, we launched a new marketplace about a month ago to bring people in to register their use cases. One of the things that we found was there was a disparity within the Internet of Things of businesses with registering their services was about the business, not about the products, and more importantly, actually the value, the use cases that they have. So hence the reason why we built the use case marketplace. And we've kept it really, really simple on the design, and with great support by the guys that built it, Woods and Walker. I'll give them a bit of a nudge to their design. But we've kept it really, really plain and simple in just trying to get the value across with the use cases. Simply having and sticking it to the key assets of your value proposition. And on our website, we have a guide on how to create value proposition. It's amazing how many people don't really understand how simple it is by following a really simple format. The problem, the solution, and then the return of investment as well. And then connecting people by giving them a form to simply fill. And then we connect the business that has that use case that can deliver to the customer that's interested. That was actually designed as a bit of a pet project of mine over the course of a year. and it was just taking notes when I was speaking to people about frustration points. Interesting, we had in the comments there that I popped up from Dean Marsh. Hi, Dean, and thanks for joining again. Dean really interacted with us really well on Tuesday as well with our deep session. But he's given some absolute gold here for feedback for a product manager in hardware manufacturers. He's telling him what he wants as a buyer. This is absolute gold information that can be taken away and quite easily solved to give a better experience. Dean, I don't know if you can comment here, but would you choose a hardware manufacturer because they had a decoder and pay slightly more, rather than one that didn't? If you can comment, and we'll share your feedback on that. So let's go back to some of the stuff that we were going to talk about here. Can you share an example? So, Helena, can you share an example of a really well thought out user experience that you've come across? Maybe one that you've worked on, or another one. It doesn't have to be IoT related either.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I've actually got a couple here, because one is IoT related, I should say, and the other one is actually an omnichannel experience, which I think works really well. So IoT, I would say what I love, because I use it on a daily basis, is Ring. I really like the Ring doorbell system, and I love the app that comes with it, and I find that really useful. Now, they have made some fairly recent changes to that, which I think have made the experience of using the app even better. So as from an IoT point of view, I really like that. Now, from an omni-channel experience, H&M and Aldi do this really, really well. So what I love the fact is if you've got you can use the app on your phone for each of those. H&M have taken it a step further now, and if you go into store and you open the H&M app in store, you can actually scan items of clothing, garments. You can find out actually where they are. Now, in the video for it, you could say red dresses, and actually red dresses will pop up to the ceiling. Obviously, that doesn't happen when you're actually there. But it will tell you where you can find specific garments in that store. So you can have, for example, I live in Washington, and so if I go into the H&M store from Monday, obviously, and I want to find something, I can go in there, open the app, and it will actually tell me where it is based on my local store. And I think that's really clever stuff. So I think in terms of experience-wise, I think some of the best experiences we are seeing now, particularly from retail, and a lot of these have come about in the last 12 months, quite understandably, because they've had to, is we're starting to see that integration of experiences across platforms and across devices. When I say that, I'm talking about versus multi-channel, for example, where each of those things are being used, but being used in isolation. We're starting to see some of the best customer experiences now integrated with each other. And so I would say H&M and Aldi on the high street are very, very good at doing that. But in terms of what I use on a daily basis, I do love the Ring doorbell. I've got to say the app I think is definitely much improved. One of the things I am really looking forward to seeing, because I have a personal interest in this, is airports and biometrics. I think that's something to really look out for in the next 12 months or so, as the airport experience becomes touchless. So that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing. I'd like to do some work around that, definitely.
Yeah. Henry?
Yeah, sure. I'm not so much an IoT guy, but I think just
doesn't have to be IoT.
No. Coming back to that point about, because I think it's a subtlety that's missed a lot. This thing about like what is the core problem that we're looking at, and I think a really good example is just headspace.com. So if you go to headspace.com, I've got their site up here. There's nothing about, right, we think of Headspace equals meditation app. There's nothing about meditation on the website. If you look at the hero section, it's very clean, big headline that simply says sleep made simple. Right below that, quiet racing thoughts, sleep soundly, wake up refreshed. Sleep by Headspace is here for you through the night, every night. Big blue call to action that says start your journey. And I think just to illustrate that point about what really is a product is a vehicle to take you from this current state of frustration, right? In this case, struggling with sleep, frustrated, anxious, etc., to this ideal positive scenario. I always talk about, right? So you've got this think of like a what do you call it, like a ski lift, right? So you've got this frustration at the bottom, and they're trying to go up here somewhere, and you are simply the vehicle taking them there. So it's not about you, right? People don't care about your about page, about how much work you put into this. Yeah, the years got in, an investment got into your recent device or product, whatever it is. It's simply about saying, we understand what your deep problem is, which is not about meditation, because meditation is, as someone that meditates, it can be boring. It's hard to do every day, right? It's inherently difficult because it's introspective. And all they're saying is like, we're going to help you sleep better. That's basically it. And I really like also the call to action to start your journey, because again, it's about, we think of product as sort of a set of features. A product is the whole experience, right? This holistic experience. And they're inviting you to sort of start moving from, hey, down here, frustrated, sad, whatever it is, to start moving towards that ideal state. So I thought it was just a really great example that I'd point people towards to sort of illustrate that point, just so that you can actually, if you're listening, you can put this thinking into action with your website, for example.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Headspace, and I love the fact that it's on Apple TV now as well. Dan, do you have any examples that you'd like to share? You're on me.
Yeah, I'm going to be really, really original and go with Google. Just the Google homepage. It's just simple. It's clean. There is one search box on the page. There's the I'm feeling lucky thing just to have a bit of character, but it just does what it says on the tin. It's simple. It's a search engine. I go to Google to search. I don't want to be sold anything. I don't want to see any of your other products. I don't want to see anything but a space to type the box. For me, that's always been sort of like the subtract until it breaks type of method. It doesn't need to be fancy. There doesn't need to be any frills. It just does what it says on the tin. Perfect for the job to be done of just, I need an easy way to find information. And then even, directly in the URL, being able to just search from there and not actually have to do anything. That's always been for me just sort of one of those things that stands out, is if you can be so confident in the effectiveness of your product to just have that one thing and not have, again, anything sort of fancy or trying to shove product down your throat. That's always sort of like the North Star for me. I'll swing another way and say something that I really don't like, which is sort of IoT related. My fiance bought me an Oral-B smart toothbrush for Christmas. I hate it. The toothbrush itself is fine. The app, the partner app that comes with is the interactive experience where it tells us to brush my teeth. It's just horrible. The whole process of having to get this massive mount, stick it onto the mirror, and it only assumes that you have a mirror directly. Otherwise you sort of stand around dripping toothpaste everywhere. The actual app itself just isn't great. It doesn't work. It doesn't detect where it is in your mouth that you're trying to brush. It's just one of those things where sort of IoT related, that doesn't really need to be an app to tell me that I need to brush my teeth 30 seconds per place. Put it on the box. Doesn't need an app. It just feels like that it's pushing out everything needs an app. We're kind of gone back to 2010 of where every company must have an app. It's just one of the ones that I think it's just a total waste. Like the toothbrush was 150 pounds because it comes with this partner app and a mount, and I could have got the same thing with a non-branded electric toothbrush. Like toothbrush is fine, but the app is a horrendous experience.
I think this is one of the examples where actually if you create an open API for the technology and then make other companies aware that have the applications like Apple Health as an example in Google Health apps and such, like where you can bring that data into their application and their experience, and they can make use of that data. I think that's really key. From what I'm hearing you say, Dan, and really resonates with me, is actually it's technology for technology's sake, and they've just bashed an app together, which is just pretty absolutely pointless. It's one of the reasons why. So for me.
Design for design sake.
So for me personally, I use the Renfo weight scales, but I don't actually open their app. I actually use Apple Health app where I've got all the other stuff from my watch and such like as well. And in fact, I only downloaded the app to get it connected so I could get the data on. I've never opened the app ever since. But they recommend, you're an Apple user, use Apple Health.
Sorry to interrupt there, but this ties into like a key point that is basically the core part of our curriculum, which is yes, we need to use user experience, but we need to know how to leverage it on a product strategy level. So let me give some specific examples. So we use a model called the MVO, so minimal viable offer, which is essentially to validate like where is their value in the market, right? What makes sense to focus on a higher level beyond just features. So a good example of this, and I'll come back to the toothpaste one after, is like Superhuman, right? An email application. Their promise, if you go to their website, is lightning fast email service, right? Because what they have done is say, okay, we understand who our target customer is firstly, which many people have personas, they don't have focused single personas. So they have, let's say, busy tech executives, for example. Now they understand that from doing user research, okay, one of many frustrations that this person has is, for example, like spending 2 to 3 hours per day on email. So what they have done is say, okay, well, there's lots of things we could look at, right? A busy tech executive, well, there's meetings, right? There's email, there's all this other stuff. And what they've done is made a very deliberate, strategic decision to say, we're going to focus just on that email topic, right? So you can do the same you could even go more specific. So within email, okay, where do we focus on? Can we try and reduce the number of emails? Can we make email faster, for example? Could we try and change company culture so that email isn't so central to somebody's workday, for example? And what they've done very cleverly is, let's say we're going to be really focused just on the emails taking 2 to 3 hours per day. How might we reduce that time? And they simply flip it to an opportunity, which is lightning fast email service. Now they're outcompeting Gmail for their niche. They charge $30 a month for an email application. We've got a waiting list of 750,000 people last time I checked, sort of 2-3 months ago. And they can do all of that because they are super focused on one very key point of value for their target customer, which is that lightning fast aspect of it. So when you have that framework and then taking that, so this is what we call the MBO, is the offer statement, right? We're promising you lightning fast email, right? We help, the framework we use is we help insert niche, so we help busy tech executive achieve whatever the desired outcome is. We help busy tech executives save 2 to 3 hours per day with the offer, so with lightning fast email, for example. Now you can validate that before building anything by testing out Facebook ads, right, with 3 or 4 different variations of this focused on different value propositions. So one could be focused on the lightning fast email service, another could be on, improving your leadership culture, for example. By testing those out with Facebook ads, with a survey, if you have existing customers, right, just sending a few variations out, you're going to have a good idea of what they really value in the marketplace. So taking this toothbrush company, if they had run this process before building anything and said, okay, what do people actually care about? Is it like, variety of flavors? Is it about ease of use? Probably, I can't even think of anything else for a toothbrush, but battery life, for example. If everybody goes, well, yeah, I want it to be really, really easy, then you've got this strategic framework to say, if anything is making this more complicated, we shouldn't be doing it. And you're immediately filtering out from off the bat, you're filtering out just so many things that shouldn't be built. Case in point, right? Dan being frustrated with a £150 toothbrush. So this framework, so when it comes to, yes, we need to use customer research, but we need to know how to use it on this strategic level, not just on a usability level, or like, should we build this feature versus this other one? Because these conversations shouldn't even be had if you've done that work initially and saying, we're going to understand what people want, right, with the MBO statement on a high level. Right, what's the point of value, like ease of use? And we just focus on that. And we do that thing really well. And that's applicable for a new business, and it's very applicable for an existing one as well, to start focusing your efforts.
I think you're absolutely right, Henry, about the UX strategy. I would say that because I'm a UX strategist, but I absolutely agree. It's about having a roadmap, isn't it? And defining what it is those outcomes are early on. And, you think about how many hundreds of thousands, I don't know what brand, Dan, your toothbrush is, although I can probably, well, I think you mentioned anyway, didn't you? But, how many hundreds of thousands they've gone on to spend developing that app, which actually very little in the way of users will actually need and actually use. And it's
even beyond that, it's frustration for them.
It's a frustration. So they've spent all this money creating frustration and friction for their users. And one of the kind of keys is, take it right back, do that discovery work, do that exploration work, do something, the toothbrush equivalent of A/B testing, whatever that is, that you mentioned, Dan, earlier on. It's just, for me, it's you think it's around about 5% of companies across industry that do this early bird discovery, exploratory work early on. And they are the 5% which are, the UX mature organizations, a couple of which I mentioned earlier. They're the ones that are, especially I think in the last 12 months since this pandemic started, that are going to see such a steep increase. And I think somebody mentioned earlier something on which I want to just talk about very briefly is the business side of UX as well. And how important that is to remember. Why are businesses, why do they want to make products and services more user-friendly? And I do talk when I'm consulting and I'm teaching potential UXs, you do have to remember there is a business side to experience as well. And I just kind of feel sorry for that toothbrush company who kind of spent all those hundreds of thousands trying to, create this weird and wonderful app, and probably have kind of taken a knock to their profit levels this year because of it. And I think it's important to think about the M word, which is kind of the money word, and the business word. What is it the business wants to achieve? And that bit is often forgotten about.
So from the business side, I do apologise. We've got a question through from Charlie. We'll answer his question quickly, and then we'll wrap up because we are actually 12 minutes over. But this has been a great session, so it's all good. But from the business side, though, being the devil's advocate, there is also R&D tax credits and stuff, especially for your UK company across Europe as well, and the US do it as well. That actually going to market with it and developing the application and making that investment, there are money. When you've got the money, there's ways of playing with the money to be able to try this out and go for a much more expensive investment in user experience and validation as well. They may have experienced, they may have believed that they would have got this type of feedback back, but they did it to prove a point. So there's also that side of the coin as well. That sometimes when we look at a company and go, why on earth did you do that? That actually there is some insane logic in the background as well. Not everybody's insane. They have insane logic. Which is all good. Okay, so we've got this question from Charlie. What would be your go-to tools to help map the customer user experience from as is to be? Oh, I like that statement, as is to be. Dan, what would you recommend?
I mean, I'd start off with a customer journey map. I don't think there's one tool which would cover this all. I think you choose the right tools for the job. So I'd use a customer journey map or an empathy map to go about the as is. And then, there would be a concoction of things to define what the to be was. I think to be, you'd get through rounds of validation. You might have 6 or 7 ideas of what to be is. You could run a design sprint to solve that particular problem. So, the go-to tools, customer journey maps, empathy maps, maybe using a design sprint, rapid prototyping. There are literally, and I think Helena will be able to speak to this as well, as there are hundreds of thousands of tools that you could use. It's all about choosing the right tool for the job. I think that's kind of commonplace around everything there is now. But from in my experience, as is, I would define it with the customer journey map, empathy map, and then to be probably go for a design sprint. I do love a good design sprint, and then you could go through rounds of rapid testing.
Would you also consider doing a customer discovery session at the very beginning of is this really worthwhile doing, and then
I think that has to be one of the inputs for a customer journey map. There's going to have to be an element of just understanding what the current state of play is. That's hearing from customers. That's going through all of the data that you have. Your as is may be a section of your product where you have really harsh or really high detractor ratings if you do NPS or customer satisfaction. So using all of the possible inputs as possible to define what the as is, and then mapping that experience out and then developing. I think baselines is going to be the key to this. Just get a firm grasp of what are the issues, and then that helps inform the to be.
Yeah, brilliant. Anything, Helena?
Well, briefly, I'd just like to build on what Dan said. I absolutely agree. Understanding the status quo, I think, is very important. So where are we now? And I talk a lot about, I'm a huge believer in not only collecting data, but creating insights from data. I think that there are two different things. Any company can collect data, but I think the hardest data to collect is qualitative data. So I think, again, just building on what Dan said, understanding the status quo, understanding how customers currently feel, definitely a customer journey map, definitely empathy mapping, and then understanding how, using something like a value proposition canvas, understanding how what you're offering directly relates to what it is the user and or customer actually want from you, and which of those pains you are directly, your product or service is a painkiller for, and how it actually solves those. I think it's so definitely, I would agree. Personas, buyer and or customer, empathy mapping, customer journey maps, value proposition canvas, absolutely. So yeah, I think it's a number of tools. It's not just a tool, and then measuring, creating those things. Some of them may be based on assumptions, ideally not, but you know, this is real life. Sometimes we have to make assumptions. Importantly, go out and validate those and then come back. So yeah, I would use a number of tools too.
Well, I'd actually disagree with that.
Interesting.
Partly, yeah. Okay. Just because
I think we're definitely going to overrun, because I'm not going to cut this one off, Henry.
No. So I mean, like, I love using customer journey map. I think it makes a huge amount of sense. And then basically exactly the process Dan said. I think the big problem is that in most companies, when they jump straight to, let's say, customer journey map, they're already envisaging a solution. This is why we ban the word MVP from the Product MBA program, because it's you're already anchoring your views with a specific view to what you're going to be building. You have quite a clear idea of that, even when you have the discipline of using customer journey map and like empathy map, these kinds of tools. I tend to see that people then manipulate any research they're doing to sort of fit that view of the world, that yes, this is the thing we should be building. And as I said before we started, right, statistically 80 to 90% of product ideas will fail. And that's data from companies like Pinterest, that's data from Google and LinkedIn as well. So good product companies. So what I tend to suggest, so yes, that works in a company like Dan's, where they have an idea of what they're trying to achieve on a strategic level and who their persona is and how that translates into product initiative. What I tend to see there is, always coming back to this point, is a lack of what is the strategy, right? Where is the value in the market that we're going to decide to focus on, and how do we know that value makes sense? We know that makes sense from the format we do by crafting and validating an MBO statement. So how does that start? That simply starts by speaking to 8 target customers, and we have a specific script for that, like points that you should be covering. Speaking to 8 customers. From that, you're going to draw insights and be able to quantify those qualitative conversations. You can say, 5 people mentioned this specific frustration. Now, quantity doesn't mean that's an acute problem or it's a unique insight. So what we then do is add an acuteness score. So how big do we think this problem is? Because your unique insight, right, that one thing that drives your product, might be something that one person said offhand, but it's the key to product success. Example, in our case, right, we are product management training. Our unique insight has always been that there's a lot of bullshit in the market, and that if we are hands-on and we get people to actually build a product in practice within this course, then that is highly valuable, because it's going against this sort of, hey, do a course, watch some videos, get your certificate at the end, like this passive approach. Now, because we saw that insight and we focus on it in our messaging and we deliver on it and we iterate and we obsess over that, is something hands-on or not, that set the framework for, we're not talking about solutions, but whenever it comes to then customer research or determining what to build, that we have this idea in our head. Is it hands-on or not? If it's not, then it's not something we're going to be doing, for example. So I think having that higher level framework is really, really important to being focused in what you eventually end up building.
Interesting.
Sorry, on that as well, just for anybody that wants to put this into practice, like if you go to Product MBA, we have a 7-day free MBA where it's covering these. How do you actually put that into practice, right? How do you craft the MBA? So maybe not to contradict the other two, but I think how do you sort of put brakes on and stress test your thinking before you jump into the user experience, essentially?
I don't think that's a disagreement, actually, Henry. I think the two go hand in hand. I think the way that you've explained that there, goes hand in hand with pretty much what Dan and I said. I don't see it as being, I see them as working together. I don't see it as being a contradiction.
Yeah, definitely.
Different way. I feel that it's you know, what you mentioned there is also extremely valid. And I you know, but in terms of the question, if you go back to the question, it's about kind of what tools do we use to help map the customer now to what that is going to be. I think both of those working together are very, very valid journeys and ways of getting there.
Yeah, I think it's great to call out the assumption that you can enter any situation with at least a bias of what you're doing. You know, like in a company like ours, you know, you think about it, and the context of the question, like defining something as it is your customers are telling you that it needs to change. So, you know, at least having or trying to table, I think that's one of the things that I personally like about design sprints, of where you can, you know, try your best to go through these exercises to try and drop all your biases, all your preconceived notice, like crazy eights and things like that, of where you can just get wild on a piece of paper. You know, we did this a couple of weeks ago for some of the things we're working on with our qualitative products, specifically Pendo Feedback, of where we're looking to completely redesign how that product does roadmaps. It's not about thinking a roadmap is an output. The real problem is in the process of creating roadmaps. If I created a really good roadmap tool, someone could only use it for 20 minutes once a quarter. If I create a tool which allows customers to facilitate the process of strategic planning on an ongoing basis, that's where the actual problem lies. That's where companies struggle. That's where people have 30 Google Sheets, a Trello board, probably a backlog in Jira, all these random ideas. That's the problem we have to solve. And I think that context is really beneficial. You have to go into something knowing exactly where you are in order to either drop that bias or at least to be upfront about what your preconceived notions are.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I think one of the other things that stands out to me as well is, you know, Helena's UX specialist, Henry product, Dan product as well, that actually the working together brings it. And that I do agree with Helena as well, that it's complementary in what you were talking about. It wasn't a sort of a challenge. Really need to wrap up. We've truly ran over by 20 minutes today. I did really want to keep these at 20 minutes, but this has just been a phenomenal conversation, and I hope it's been helpful to everybody. But one of the things I just want to share with the community here is that actually what we're talking about here is that sometimes technology for technology's sake is all good if you're at a very early cusp, but really think about and get out, talk and validate and listen to users and customers and buyers. And map it out, think about it. They're telling you what they want. If you give them what they want, they're going to buy your product and help you expand and grow. And hopefully you might make the money that companies like Google and Twilio and Apple and such like make as well. So Helena, Dan, Henry, thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. It's been absolutely brilliant. We thoroughly enjoyed it. We've had a number of comments and stuff come through as well. So thanks to everybody for participating on the show this morning. And on that note, I will say good morning, have a great day, and speak to you all soon.